What makes a good DPS character? I would say 4 things make up a DPS: their damage, how easy it is to do that damage, their teams, and how strong their supports are. So there are 2 main types of damage dealers. You have your AoE damage dealers and you have your single target damage dealers. Most of the time, your AoE damage dealers are going to be better because at worst, a single target damage dealer is going to be destroyed by AoE. But at worst, with an AoE damage dealer, they're mid in like single target. That's basically it. Like if you take the best AoE damage dealer, Nevi, and you put him in a single target scenario, he's still incredibly good in single target, right? Whereas if you take a character like, Kinich in single target, right? He's really good in single target. However, take him into AoE and it becomes an RNG fest of whether he's going to hit the other opponent. And if he doesn't, then the damage is not really that great comparatively to someone like Nevi. Now, another thing that makes characters good is front-loaded damage. I think it is the best form of building a character to do damage because a lot of the times front-loaded can just completely destroy a wave. However, there are one case to my knowledge, which is Raiden, who actually does have an issue with front-loading all of her damage because she kills the boss too fast and she is a character who wants to desperately do her entire rotation. So it's bad on certain characters. However, they haven't really designed a front-loaded damage character badly yet. And overall, front-loading your damage does seem to be the best way to get the higher clear times, basically. There is also the consistent high damage method, right? It's a method of just like very short downtime, and you consistently do a lot of damage. It can sometimes be like, if you look back in the day when we were looking at Hu Tao versus Hyperbloom, her setup would take time, whereas Hyperbloom would just be a little bit lower than Hu Tao's peak. But overall, you would probably finish a chamber faster using Hyperbloom because it never stopped doing its damage. And that is where these characters with short downtime and then high amount of damage that they're able to do just consistently is where that comes from, basically. We just have that kind of character, and it's very good. Now, the ease that you can do the damage is a big factor as to why, Arlecchino and Nevi are still number 1 and 2 in the game. That's 2 and 1. Nevi's better than Arlecchino, I would say. So basically, Nevi is just so consistent. You don't have to worry about Nevi, failing you because you got bad luck on your RNG, or Arlecchino failing you because you ended up running into 2 opponents, right? She controls her AoE. However, when you look at a character like Kinich, once again using him as an example, he doesn't control his AoE, the enemy controls his AoE, which makes him susceptible to heavy RNG, basically. If an enemy is 50 feet away and another enemy is right next to Kinich, right? You will not hit that 50 feet away enemy. It's a big issue that he has. The enemies control his AoE. It's kind of annoying. However, in that example, Arlecchino also wouldn't, but Arlecchino can generally hit and control, being able to hit all the opponents, whereas Kinich, not so much. And it's another reason why AoE damage dealers are generally better than single target. So let's talk about teams. It's honestly something that I overlook constantly. I don't really care about the teams. It's a very minuscule part of my decision making when I make a character or I say a character's good, just because I don't really see, unless it's a support character. Support character, that's a different thing. But most DPSs in this game have actually 5 different teams that are actually decent, but there's generally one that is pretty good and very stable, I would say, right? I don't think I'm ever going to change Nevi off of this team. However, I could use Zhongli instead of Shilonen, but that's just how I build my team. I don't really see this as a huge thing for characters, just because half the time all the characters have different teams. It just is a matter of, are you willing to make those different teams? There's not really much to say. There's really is not. I feel like teams only come into play on certain characters who are very limited, right? I would say Kinich is a very limited character, honestly. Kinich, there is very few things that I can do with his team. I don't, Bennett, Furina, these 2, if I remove them, the damage goes down in the team quite a bit. And if I do the same with Chaska, it goes down quite a bit. If I remove these 2, these characters do definitely want certain supports. It matters when you can't like take off a character from the team because it drastically decreases the team's effectiveness. And that is really what I would say is a big issue with some characters, right? Because I can take Bennett off of Arlecchino's team. I could, but I'm not gonna. Like, there's, you know, she does enough damage for me to not want to use Bennett on her team. But, like, she can do a lot more damage with Bennett on her team. Now, let's go into the next one. Strong supports. Well, this team, I would say. Actually, no, not this team. Hold on. Give me a minute. This team is basically comprised of some of the best supports in the game. We have Fischl, we have Nahida, we have Fiorina. These are insanely strong supports, and I would say Fiorina is the real true. It's like a combination of Nahida and Fischl because the amount of damage buff she's giving plus the amount of off-field damage she's doing is pretty insane. Also, Fiorina applying with Hydro to make Bloom Cores, to make Hyper Bloom possible. It really just makes it to where this team really functions super well, and having these strong supports be able to work on your team very easily is a massive W for Chloride, because her personal damage, not so well, I'm gonna be honest, but her team damage is pretty good, right? They could have buffed Chloride's damage by like 50%. I still don't think she would be like #1 character in the game, because this is a team DPS sort of build, right? You don't necessarily have to be a top damage dealer to have a top damage dealing team, I would say. Chloride is a character who sacrifices her power for strong supports, and she does have very easy damage also, but I would say most of her success goes to her strong supports, her application, her pretty decent damage. Like, she's not bad in damage, but like she's all right. Like, for damage, she's not great, but like she's good since she has this entire team with her setup. If you wanted Chloride to be like a hyper carry type character, then she's gonna suffer indefinitely and never be able to do that, basically. But with this team, she's able to do a sufficient enough damage by far. There's no reason for that to be there. Now, just to make sure we're clear on this, this is something that I would not consider strong supports, mainly because there is not team damage going here. Strong supports, what I mean by this is the team is sort of doing damage with you, whereas this team, not so much. Fiorina's doing damage with you, but that's a 1 out of 4 or 1 out of 3, I guess you could say, strong support. I don't really see Shinha doing damage with you, and then Bennett is not really doing damage with you, so that's not. So while I say strong supports, I mean strong as in like their actual strength doing damage, you know, because I would consider Nahida to be able to do her pretty well damage. I think it's like 30,000 off-field damage, along with applying Dendro to make Fiorina and then Fischl Hyper Bloom. That's pretty good. That is a team, strong support team, I would say. Hu Tao is actually a character you can say that with, because what you could do with Hu Tao is you're going to have Xingqiu, Fiorina, and I think actually it's Yelan and Fiorina actually works well on this. I think so, but I'm not so sure that this works. I'm pretty sure I used it before. But Yelan and Fiorina are able to do a lot of damage if you're using Charge Attack Hu Tao. They basically do the same amount of damage that Hu Tao was doing combined. Like, it's sort of like a 50-50 share from what I remember. It's been a bit since I did that video. But they basically do a 50-50 share between the damage. And once again, you have another example where it's just Xiangling, Xingqiu, they're doing a lot of damage, and then you have Raiden there who is helping them do damage, and that is also another thing. She is not Raiden herself is not necessarily dealing a lot of damage, but also you have to sort of contribute some of Xiangling and Xingqiu's damage due to them not having to use as much energy recharge stats. You have to contribute some of that damage to Raiden rather than contributing it to themselves, I would say. A lot of people don't do that, whereas I feel like that's just not giving Raiden enough credit. Obviously, this team is kind of outdated now. We have Overload, which would just be Chevy, and I think Kujasara instead of Bennett or something. Or maybe Kujasara instead of Xiangling. I don't remember. But yeah, that's basically what I think makes a strong DPS character in the game. I don't really, have many other criteria that I would follow. If you have any in, the comments, sure, go ahead, leave them in the comments, and I'll, talk about them maybe later. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.